Hi guys, welcome back. This is part 4 on our electric field series that I'm doing here. And in this video here, I kind of want to just begin by kind of summarizing a lot of what we talked about so far. So I know we're really getting into some pretty heavy stuff here with some of the videos that, especially the third video, part 3 that we left off at. I think it's kind of important to kind of just summarize where, kind of what got us here and really look at that here before I kind of present to you guys some new ideas to think about here in this video. Because in part 2, really, we really looked at the nature of the electric field, and we looked at that from one very important equation that we have for the electric field. And that equation is that the electric field in volts per meter is really equal to the force in Newton's mechanics divided into really the electric charge unit. So there's these kind of 3 variables that we were kind of exploring with in part 2. And you can see towards the end of that video, really where if we kind of follow that and really look at the nature of electric charge, we kind of went into the nature of quantum mechanics, looked at that from really just a single electron perspective. We kind of looked at the wave function, and really where that kind of led us to was really a world of uncertainty. And we kind of talked a little bit about this world of uncertainty in part 3 as well, which is really in quantum mechanics, we talk about really the background for quantum mechanics to kind of exist, essentially, if you want to look at it from that perspective. It's really this quantum fluctuation field, which really becomes almost synonymous with noise in electrical engineering. And I kind of touched on that in part 1 of my structured water video as well. But in part 2, what we looked at towards the end of that video is we talked about something that what's called the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. And this uncertainty principle is really, in my opinion, is kind of describing the uncertainty of this electric field in its true universal nature, which is exactly what I think the electric field is. And those 2 key variables that are involved in that Heisenberg uncertainty principle is really the nature of the position. If we talk about this electric charge unit and its kind of wave-like nature, which is really its fundamental nature, it's wave-like nature. You can see that in previous videos we looked at that, where that electron, it's never still. It's constantly in dynamic motion. So there's really an uncertainty in that, the kind of the wave position of that electrically charged unit, whatever it is, with its momentum. And its momentum, we kind of describe that as being really the mass times the velocity. And it's really, it's connected into where we get force. And I also mentioned that really those 2 key variables, if we look at it, they're really, what's connected to both of them is this universal speed here that we kind of looked at, where we kind of get into where James Clerk Maxwell was, I think, trying to take us into really understanding the true nature of electricity with the universal speed of light. And it seems like everything that we're doing really in physics and electrical engineering, really all we're doing here when we're looking at the electric field from that perspective, because I think the universal electric field it's united in with this speed of light. And we're gonna, towards the end of this video, I'm gonna present to you, kind of open up a new model to kind of really look at this, that kind of ties, everything that we've talked about together so far. And it seems like all we're doing in physics really is we're really trying to, I'm going to use the word couple into this universal world where the speed of light exists, which I think is united with the 4th phase of matter, this plasma type substance. And it's naturally where electric charge is truly sourced from. It's contained within this dielectric plasma type substance here. Now, this universal speed of light is also really fundamental in understanding Einstein's special relativity, which is where it kind of began for him. And really, all I see with his work here is that we're really just trying to take the universal speed of light here, that I think is united into something truly universal, which is this dielectric plasma type of substance. I think with his work, all we're really trying to do is take that universal speed of light and kind of fit it into really the individual observer's perspective. So it's like this individual identity that we have here. It's like we're taking something universal and trying to make it fit into something individual, which is kind of our individual nature and the way that we experience the physical world. So there's a whole lot of mathematics involved in how that was done. And it involves Hendrik Lorentz's transformations too, which is a set of equations that kind of make this work here for the individual perspective. So again, I think it's really important to kind of see that we're trying to kind of couple into this universal world here. And I use the word couple because it's a very important word to use, because really a coupling kind of mechanism here, if you look at it from really the nature of motion, like think about a motor, for example. A motor, really just what it does, it turns a shaft. So there's really, there's work that's being done here to turn this shaft, but it really doesn't have any use to us until we actually couple something to that shaft. So now that turning shaft can actually turn something, of value to us. And it's really this coupling mechanism that we're doing here, I think, in this kind of universal space that I'm trying to describe here. There is a universal motion happening here, and it's connected into the physical. And in my opinion, I think that's really what's driving the physical. And it's what's driving all this physical stuff to kind of animate itself here. And really our theories of relativity, our understanding of quantum mechanics with this Heisenberg uncertainty principle, it just seems like all we're doing is trying to couple into this universal dimension of space that I'm talking about. Now in part 3, really, I kind of centered in on really the nature of Planck's constant, which is really the most fundamental energy quantity that we have here in all of physics. It's really the engine that drives quantum mechanics, and it's really the catalyst that we use for all of our information theories. So it's very important to get an understanding of where this entity comes from. And in part 3, what I was describing to you guys was that Planck's constant, that unit quantity of energy, which is represented as the joule, it's actually represented in joules per second. It's, in my work, what it's leading to is that this energy quantity, it's reactive by nature. And I think that's really important to see, because really the nature of reactance, at least in my work, it really leads us into something that we might be able to get to that kind of describes really artificial action. Because in all of my video on part 2, I kind of showed you guys that we never really get to the true source of what action is. And it's so important to get to that place to understand really the nature of electric charge, which really takes us to the fundamental nature of how the electric field works. And we never get to that place. And I think this is important here with this video in part 3 showing that Planck's constant might be something that's reactive which might actually take us to a place of really looking at it from the perspective of artificial action. Now, this is so important, I think, to kind of consider, because this will really tell us that the physics, the quantum field theories, the particle physics, all of these physics that we use today, which use this Planck's constant, it's like the kind of the heart and soul of all these sciences. It connects so many things together. It might actually have its roots into something that's of an artificial nature. And now I think we can actually maybe take that a little bit further. Maybe in future videos we're going to look at this, where we actually get to the source of Einstein's general relativity, which is where he talks about really, he really introduces the nature of what he calls a stress tensor, this whole tensor system that he uses. And in all my work, that's what might actually be leading us to really the fundamental source of this reactive circuit here, where it's like a stress tension, or what I refer to as it's simply just a disturbance to the natural space medium. It's like it disturbs it, and that disturbance is actually what my work is showing is actually what produces this Planck unit quantity of energy, which is used to drive everything in physics and everything that we know in information theory. So this is very important to see this, because we're kind of laying out a possible foundation here that has its roots into really the source of what artificial means. And I mentioned earlier that if we look at Einstein's special relativity, all he's really doing is really kind of like, he's like coupling from this universal speed of light and what it's truly united in. He's trying to make that work for the individual human experience here, that really its fundamental nature is wanting to control and manipulate things. And I don't know if you guys can see kind of where I'm going here, but it's really leading us into really a broader understanding of this artificial science that we're creating here. And it might be something that's truly artificial. Because in my work here, where we're going to go is we're going to take us to somewhere where I think it takes us to somewhere truly universal. And this changes things. This changes things significantly, because where this universal dimension kind of begins here, it exists within a space that's not physical. And I think this plasma type of substance that I'm talking about here, it really is the background for quantum mechanics to run. It is, but we don't see it as that. We just look at it as more random fluctuations. So it's like this quantum fluctuation field is kind of sitting in front of this universal plasma type substance that's kind of running in the background here that we can't quite see yet. So this is where all my work is kind of leading to. Now, I think it's kind of important to kind of just now throw out some new ideas here on kind of what this is all really truly leading to here. Because I mentioned in part 1 of my structured water video, there was a scientist that was here. He died back in 2011. He has really proposed to us really a new model on how really the nature of electric charge naturally permeates the entire space everywhere. And what he's done is he's actually shown that in his model, what he's come up with is actually what's called the Muon. So this Muon unit here, that what he's described in his model, really acts as the container for electric charge. And this Muon, on what he's really describing here, it actually is what it contains what's called the Muon entity. Now in particle physics, what a muon is, it's simply a heavy electron. So it's part of this electron family. And that's very important to mention here too, is that really the nature of the electron, which we don't really know what it is. We haven't really gotten to that place to truly understand what it actually is. But we know that it does have a certain family of other particles that kind of coexist with it. And in Abston's model, what he's done is he's kind of unified that muon with the electric charge, with the universal speed of light, and he's also combined Planck's constant. He's also combined Sir Isaac Newton's acceleration of gravity constant, and he's also produced a very accurate model of the proton and electron mass ratio, which is something that's very fundamental in physics. And he's done this all within this one kind of unit of space, really is what it is. And it contains this muon type of electron character, which in my opinion, this is what truly simulates the fourth phase of matter. Now, personally, I think this is just, this is a revolutionary type of scientific model that's kind of been brought to our attention here. And really, the conventional scientific community has just completely just pushed it aside. It has never even penetrated their perception on really anything to do with how they look at science today. And Aspen, he's really been working on this model for about 40 years. And he really didn't get too far with it. He tried so hard to kind of get it into the, the conventional scientific minds, because he's really taking kind of Einstein's work, which was kind of stuck in the world of relativity, and trying to take the universal speed of light and make it work for our individual nature. And he was also trying to take Paul Dirac's work, which was trying to understand really the nature of the electron and the positron and what is really going on there. He was really trying to take these two worlds and go a little bit more deeper than anybody else has. And he's produced this model, and this is the model that I've been kind of working on here for the last 2 years to kind of get an idea of kind of what this means, and a lot of things have been kind of clicking here. Because really this Muon unit, which kind of contains this dual pair of muons, kind of the positive and the negative kind of muon, it's contained right inside this thing. What it actually does is it sits right below the proton. So it's right below hydrogen. And it goes into a world that's not physical. And I think this is really quite fascinating, because it's really taking us to a place to really understand really what the nature of electric charge is. And it's contained inside the proton. So we're going inside the atomic nucleus here. And this is where this plasma-like substance is, which kind of unifies the electric charge unit here, both positive and negative. It's contained within kind of one holistic type of substance. Now, what's also important to mention here too is that we really have to go back to video number 1 in my structured water video, where I talked about really the nature of quarks. Because this is what we actually believe in particle physics today, is that this is what we believe resides in the nucleus of the atom, which has really replaced the proton and the neutron in the atomic nucleus. And I think it's really important to kind of touch on this, because I mentioned that in part 1 there, I mentioned that really that model, it only has a mathematical existence to it. And it doesn't really have any existence in space. And I think that's very important to bring up now, because with Aspen's model of the Muon, which acts like the container for this plasma substance, this plasma dielectric substance, what this model is actually going to show is that we can actually begin to see how this dielectric plasma substance becomes electrically grounded to the ether, the pure still ether in my model. And I think that's important to touch on, because we're showing we're bringing in this electrical ground connection again that we talked about in part 2, which is so important, because you can see that really the nature of this electric field, when we start to demonstrate some of this stuff, we're going to see that the electric field, when we ground it, or when we shield the cable and we shield that electric field, this is eliminating the radiative component from radiating out into the space. So there's something to this electrical ground circuit that we haven't quite understood yet. And I think with this model, it's going to take us in the right direction, because I want to take us to where I think that electrical ground truly leads us to, which again, I just kind of described it, how this plasma type dielectric substance becomes grounded to the pure still ether. And this is a different model to look at it from this perspective. And I think it's important, because we're going to see that this quark model, again, it might be nothing more than just something that's artificially created. And really, this becomes the true source of electric field energy now. And this changes our whole model on really electrical engineering here, because it really fits some nice pieces together on what James Clerk Maxwell's work was kind of missing back in the 1800s, because he wasn't really showing us really where the nature of charge, or the nature of electric charge, and how it actually exists within space. Like, where does it truly come from? And Aspen's model really kind of fits that nicely. So it kind of shows us where this electric field energy is truly coming from. And it also gives us a completely new model on how to look at really the nature of the magnetic field and the rotating magnetic field. This is something we're going to talk about in future videos, because I'm going to dedicate this just kind of on a subject of its own, because there's something really revolutionary happening here that I think, intentionally have buried over the last 100 years. Because this was really the model that Tesla was working with back in the late 1800s, where he was coming up with all of his theories and all of his designs and patents. I mean, he was really working this model on a completely different level. So he seemed to know about all this stuff, and how electric charge was kind of contained within a plasma type of substance. But it's with Aspen's work now, we actually have some really deep mechanics and mathematics to truly give us to understand this, that has been really completely eliminated from science today. And it's kind of my mission to kind of bring this into your guys' awareness, because it's big and it really changes things. Because like I said, when we look at this plasma type of substance that sits really inside the proton in a dimension of space that's not physical, this container of electric charge here it's, like I said, it's inside the atomic nucleus. And it would be inside the nuclear genome, because everything's connected on our understanding of nucleic acids. It's all connected with protons. So this hydrogen element is just there. And this substance, this Muon model in absence physics, it sits just below hydrogen. So we're beginning to build something completely not physical. And in my work now, where my work has taken me, is that really what Abston has also showed with his model is that what naturally comes out of this, along with these other constants here that we've been trying to unify in physics for so long, he's done it all. And what's naturally comes out of this is this fine structure constant. And I talked about this in part 2 of my video on how this is just one of the most incredible fundamental constants we have in physics. And it really gives rise to really how electric charge kind of interacts with each other through, you know, its field of force potential here. So it's really involved in that. So it's so important to kind of get an understanding of where this comes from. But with Aston's work, it actually is it's a byproduct of this Muon unit. And what I've done with my model and where I've kind of taken things is that really what the fine structure constant means, at least what it means to me, this is showing us where actually human perception within the mind, this is where it's born. And I know this might be really a dramatically new idea to kind of think about here, because what that's telling us is really the nature of our mind. And again, the mind has not been defined in science. We need to know this. And with this model here that Aspen has started bringing to us, I've kind of taken it to another level here that kind of describes, it's really defining what the mind is. And it begins with this muon type of character here that just sits omnipresent in space. It just permeates all the space. It's just sitting here. And it's not being forced to move like we think in relativity. So our laws of classical motion from that perspective need to shift a little bit, because this muon and this plasma type of field, it's just sitting here in space. And we really have to kind of come up with some new theories of motion to kind of understand this, because what Aston's work is showing, and what I see myself, is that this muon plasma type of activity, it doesn't have any resistance to its motion. And the reason why is because I don't think it's actually moving. It's not actually moving anywhere, in a sense, if we look at this from a relativistic perspective, where, you know, we kind of have to have one position and then we move relative to that, right? Whereas this muon unit, it's just sitting in space. It's just there. It's just sitting here. And I know that's a interesting perspective to kind of bring to you guys, because it's going to bring some new ideas on really how we need to think about this. And like I said in part 2 or part 3 of my video there, it kind of takes us back to where our laws of motion came from. Because we have Sir Isaac Newton's laws of motion, which are based in inertia. And then we also have René Descartes' laws, which have been completely ignored for the last 400 years. And I think it's been done intentionally, because what he's showing is that really the background, the foundation for his theory of motion is the divine. So this changes things significantly. But this video here, what I kind of wanted to just do was just kind of open up this idea to you guys so you can actually see it now. Whereas, you know, previous videos I've been talking about this plasma type of substance and how it exists in a space that's not physical, and, you know, do I have anything to back up my theories? And, you know, you guys have probably had a lot of questions about this, but really what I'm presenting to you now is that a lot of this work has already been done. And I think this is really revolutionary, because what it's showing us is that we as human beings even though we're trapped in this five sense reality here, the nature of human perception really is rooted into a dimension of space that's not physical, and it's united within a dielectric type of substance, which Descartes called a mind substance, that's really truly universal. So it's almost like we're looking in onto the physical world from a dimension of space that's really truly universal. And I think that this is just a fascinating idea to run with here, because it should really change the nature of what we really think about ourselves, and how our mind is not just stuck in this brain, and how this physical world is just not all that there is. There's a more subtle dimension of space where the mind is, and that's actually, illuminating this physical world here and animating it from a sense. It's all being done from this universal dimension of space here that's connected into what Aspen has brought to us and what he called as the Muon unit. And I think this is just a fascinating idea to kind of leave us with here on, this Christmas Day, to kind of think about this. Think about the nature of who we are. And looking at my video number 3 there on how really we have some things that we need to be concerned about here with the nature of particle accelerators, and how we're hammering particles together, because really all we're doing is we're trying to disturb this. We're trying to disturb this natural plasma type of substance that's contained with this Muon. We're hammering particles together to try and disturb that. And remember what I said about that disturbance earlier, which is connected really to the true nature of what reactance is in electrical engineering, which is connected into how we get the Planck unit quantity of energy, which is like the catalyst to drive all of quantum mechanics, and it's the catalyst to drive information theory. And if we look at this infective agent, this is nothing but a piece of information. And what this model here is showing here, that really the true source of information comes from somewhere truly universal. And something that truly universal can never be isolated. And I talked about that again in my Structured Water Part 1 video. So you can see that, I'm hoping you can kind of see how a lot of this is kind of connected together here. And it becomes so important to kind of see things from this perspective, because this opens up a whole new world here. Because this plasma type of mind substance, this is a more subtle dimension of ourselves that exists within everybody, but it's essentially dormant. It's just not being, it's completely dormant. That's the best word to use here, because we don't know about it. We have no knowledge of it. And I think this is big to kind of show, a direct science connection here, that really the nature of our mind, it's the nature of human perception is something that's truly universal. And this is exactly what this fine structure constant really truly means to me. And that's why, people like Richard Feynman thought this was the most brilliant, fundamental constant that we've ever discovered. And it's, impossible for us to conceive what it truly means. I don't think so. I really don't think so. I think that this is really taking us to somewhere really special on how the nature of human perception, on how this whole physical world just appears to us in our mind. It's born within a dimension of space, a very specific one that is really not physical. And it's inside that proton entity. So the periodic table of the elements, where it begins with hydrogen, there's something deeper here that we need to see. It's this model here, but what he hasn't done, and he didn't really know what this was at the time, at least I don't think, was that what is this electron then? Because again, we talked about this in part 2, is that we need to look at this from the perspective of one electron. So what he's done here is brought us into this electron family, so into the muon unit, but it doesn't take us to a place to where like, what is the electron now? What is this single unit of electric charge? Like, what does it mean to us? And what my work is showing is that this Muon unit, this plasma type of substance, the electron is actually inside that. So the electron is actually inside this muon unit. And here's a kind of a description of kind of how I see it here, is that really the nature of the electron, it's inside there, and it kind of behaves kind of like a tesseract system. And this is really fundamental to really understanding, I think, really the nature of electric charge and really the nature, the dynamics of this plasma type substance. Because my work is showing is that it does not stop there. So if you can imagine, we have this muon unit that sits just below hydrogen, and inside this muon unit, we have the electron, and it kind of structures itself in like a tesseract type of geometric structure. And inside that electron, like, we can keep going here. And I'm not going to do that in this video, but I just wanted to open that up because this is this plasma type of substance here that's truly universal. This is an absolutely incredible substance here that's connected to our mind. It's connected to memory because it's actually storing the electric charge here. So there's actually, we can get into a newer model of what actually memory is, and really all the dimensions of the human mind. We really need to kind of look at this a little bit differently, and we might actually have a newer beginning model of this is kind of how I describe the mind space. You know, Jesse and I talk about this in a lot of our videos. This is why I call it that, because there really is a more subtle dimension of space that becomes truly universal, which is connected to the mind, which is why I call it the mind space. And I know this is some really heavy stuff here. I hope I'm kind of not overwhelming you guys, but it's just, I needed to get this information presented here. And it's something that I've been working on for the past few years, and I've been kind of putting pieces together, and it's just now, within like really the last few weeks here, has been eye-opening on how all this kind of just fits together, and I can kind of just see it more clearly now in my mind, how this kind of works. And I think this is going to be very important for us to review, especially with everything that's going to be coming in physics, because this whole world that I'm talking about, this fourth phase of matter, this is going to explode. And coming in February, you're going to see some new models on how this substance truly works and how it unifies everything that Einstein was doing and all kinds of things in quantum mechanics. And we might be able to make some new connections to what dark matter is, because this muon character here that I'm talking about, this really is getting us into the nature of what dark matter I think truly is. And it's like a cosmic seed here that's kind of just sitting in space everywhere. So I just kind of wanted to present this to you guys because I think this is big. This is a big, you know, scientific kind of new perspective here that kind of takes us into really understanding the nature of our own mind. So if we want to understand how this physical world truly works, we need to understand our mind. And this is going to be big in science, because now this connects into, you know, one of my early mentors, and I highly respect this guy so much, Tom Campbell, and a lot of work that he's doing. Because, guys, this guy he's in that universal dimension of space here that I'm trying to describe here. He's in there, and he has enormous amounts of experience in this world. And he's trying to give us some new ideas to think about on how this non-physical world connects into the physical. And this new electrical model that I'm kind of presenting here might help us see this and kind of put some pieces together. Because with Einstein's relativity and quantum mechanics, which is all rooted in uncertainty, like this is not going to get us there. Because both of these two sciences, relativity and quantum mechanics, they're drawing off this universal dimension of space that I'm talking about here, which really is the true nature of the electric field, which is really truly universal in my model, which is really where human perception is born. And I think it's really important to kind of just see these ideas. And again, my whole model and everything that I'm going to be doing is going to be building off all of this. So we're going to be putting more pieces together, showing some more science, some more mathematics. All kinds of things are going to be united here because, again, coming in the next few months, this whole world is going to blow up and things are going to be, we're going to be looking at science completely different. And we really need to define some accuracy of what this fourth phase of matter truly represents. And if this is truly a mind type substance, which is what I think it is, it's going to involve really people with really some more direct experience within their own mind. Now I know that may seem kind of impossible to conceive what that means because really we're just kind of drawn to this physical five sense world. And we don't really quite know, or some of us might know, but most of us don't know that there's actually a subtle dimension of our existence that we can connect into. And there's a lot of stuff here. This is where really thoughts are born. This is where, you know, our memories are. This is some very deep stuff that we don't quite understand in science yet. So I think this world that I'm describing here might be able to open that up and really introduce some new ways to look at this. Again, as we move along with these videos, we're going to keep diving into this electric field and kind of putting more pieces together. But I'm hoping you can kind of see how some of these pieces are beginning to fit already. And I thank you guys for watching.